This is the Xbox Series X. It is real and I have it in my hands right now. Don't believe me? Well, let me show you. So first of all, Microsoft were very kind to invite us out for a very early look at the Series X. Now keep in mind that this is not final hardware. I mean, this won't be shipping until almost the end of the year. However, it is definitely going to be our best look at what the next generation of console experience can really provide. In this video, not only am I giving you a sneak peek at what's inside the Series X, but on top of that we have gameplay and pretty much every spec you might want to know. So today is a very good day because I can actually walk you through exactly what is inside the Xbox Series X. So to start with, we have to look at the main board, or specifically the dual main boards. Because of the unique design of the Series X, it actually has a very unusual cooling system. One of the things I'm most excited about is just how powerful the SoC inside the Series X is. So there's a lot to talk about here, but first I want to go over the actual CPU spec. So keep in mind, this is an SoC that has not only the CPU and the GPU on board, and yet they're able to fit 8 Zen 2 cores that can clock all the way up to 3.8 gigahertz. And that's not some kind of like boost speed. It can run at 3.8 gigahertz sustained pretty much forever. And you have a couple of options if you're a developer with this guy. So if you want multi-threading, you actually have to drop from 3.8 to 3.6 gigahertz. But a lot of developers are probably going to be fine with 8 very fast cores on board. Now, when it actually comes to games, 7 of those cores are available to a game, and 1 is reserved for like Windows and the OS in the background. But that's a lot of power, especially considering that most of this chip is actually graphics. They just threw in 8 cores because it's much better than the previous generation. And by much better, I mean like 4 times better. On top of that, we have some seriously powerful graphics. So on board, we have twice the graphics horsepower of the Xbox One X, which I would just keep in mind only came out a couple years ago, or like 2.5 years ago at this point. And beyond that, we also have 8 times the graphics horsepower of the original Xbox One. And there are a couple of really interesting things here. So first of all, this is taking advantage of AMD's brand new RDNA 2.0 architecture, which is not even out on the PC yet. There's a lot that comes with that, and there are also some customizations that Microsoft has done specifically for the Series X. So for example, there is not only ray tracing built in, but also there's like some specific hardware and audio engines that have been built into the chip. But the GPU itself is massive. We're looking at 52 CUs running at 1825 megahertz. Now, if you're not a speeds and feeds kind of person, that might not mean anything, but this is an incredibly huge graphics card, or GPU, I suppose, and it is running at very, very high clocks. So with the Series X dev kit here, the first game I'm going to try is Minecraft. Now, this is no ordinary version of Minecraft. This is, to be fair, a very early technical demo, but this is incorporating ray tracing. So you can see, standard lighting, looks like Minecraft as you expect. However, if I turn it on, the game is completely transformed. I mean, can you see the difference here? That's crazy. You can even see how the lava is like reflecting on the actual material of the rails. Oh, this is a really squeaky chair. How annoying is that when I shouldn't get up, huh? Not only is the lighting completely transformed, but you actually can see some real depth in the world that obviously when you have ray tracing off, it's fine. It's sort of very brightly lit as you're expecting with Minecraft. When you turn it on, it makes a huge difference. I mean, just look at the way that the torch is naturally reflecting. And you actually can see how there's real texture and there's real depth in the gold. And if you look on this side, you can see the diamond here. It's really cool at how much this sort of brings the Minecraft world alive. And as we walk into this room with a bunch of glowstone and glass panes in front, with standard Minecraft lighting, it looks fine, but it really doesn't do much. You can just sort of see a little bit of light come through. When I turn on ray tracing, it completely changes the scene. You can see how it's almost like a rainbow effect and the light naturally sort of cascades. This is just a tech demo, so it is an early look at what ray tracing will do on the Series X. But I mean, it makes a huge difference. I mean, just look at that. That's crazy. Next, I have some gameplay of Gears 5 running on the Xbox Series X. Now, this is a very early build. It only took them a few weeks to get this up and running, and therefore probably some other things are going to be tweaked and changed before it finally comes out. However, a couple of key things to keep in mind is that not only is this running at 4K 60 with all of the Ultra PC presets enabled, they've even added some additional settings that were not even able to run on the PC or the Xbox One X. So, sit back, grab your popcorn, and enjoy some true Series X gameplay.
Okay, now, open fire! No, we got that! Off the frag! Close it up! Got it!
Feeding the SoC is a full 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, which you actually can see is arranged around the chip like this. So it's actually a slightly unusual configuration. So Microsoft are taking advantage of a 320-bit memory bus, and that's because there's a mixture of 1 gig and 2 gig modules. Now, as the end user, you're probably not going to notice any of this, but as a developer, you actually have 2 classes of memory available. So there's 10 gigs of GPU optimized memory, which is essentially the fastest RAM for obviously the graphics. However, you also have a further 3.5 gigs, which can be played with. It's slightly slower, but if you have to offload like your audio or something to that, you can use that. Now, it's kind of interesting to think because on top of that, you have a further 2.5 gigs of RAM, which is partitioned off for like the OS and apps and that kind of thing. Now, when you look at this, it might not actually seem super impressive, right? I mean, we've got 4 times the CPU power, we've got up to 8 times the GPU power compared to the Xbox One, but we only have about double the memory. In fact, even less if you compare to the Xbox One X. However, there's actually one other thing here which is sort of helping to improve the memory story. So if you flip the board over, we'll see another major improvement, which is the standard 1 terabyte SSD. Now, this is actually a big component of why the Series X is able to be a big leap forward in a lot of ways. So of course, the previous generation was bottlenecked by fairly slow hard drives. It made sense back on the time, but in 2020, we expect more speed, and every Series X game also expects to have a SSD. So this is a PCI 4.0 SSD. It is, of course, been custom designed by Microsoft, so it's actually fairly powerful. It can pull almost 4 watts by itself, which is part of the reason why it's sort of shielded and cooled in this sort of way. But there are actually a couple of very interesting things they're doing. So first of all, like I said, all games expect to have access to all of this performance at all times, right? So the CPU, the GPU, they're all going to sit at that very consistent clock speed, and the same goes for the SSD. So you're getting 2.4 gigabytes per second, pretty much period. They've done a lot of optimizations, of course, on the latency side, which is important because you actually can pull stuff straight off of the SSD straight to memory. So essentially we'll kind of expand that 16 gigabytes based on how developers use it. But I don't want to say downside, but one of the things you have to consider is that while, yes, you can plug in a USB hard drive and play games off of that on the Series X, you can't play Series X games, just simply because they expect that high level of speed. So if you have like your Xbox One games on a hard drive, you can plug in and it'll be just fine. But if you want more than 1 terabyte of space on your Series X, you're going to want one of these guys. So this is a little Seagate expansion module. So there actually were some rumors beforehand about this little mystery port here, which they've very cleverly not shown until this point. And essentially that means that you can expand with another SSD right into the back of the system. So I know it looks like a memory card, but this is actually a full 1 terabyte SSD, which essentially gives you the exact same performance of your standard SSD. And of course, you can imagine with that expansion port on the back, maybe larger capacities, maybe you could own a couple of these. We'll see how expensive they are, to be fair. So this next demo is of Quick Resume. So to give you a little bit of context here, we're not going to do any cuts here to show you just how fast this is. So I have a Series X controller. I'm playing on this actual Series X. So right now I have State of Decay up, or State of Decay 2 rather up. You can see it playing on the Series X works just as you would expect. However, say I want to, I don't know, play Forza. Well, if I switch over to it, you can see just how quick it's going to move. So essentially in the background, it's saving State of Decay in its own VM. So I can jump in and you look, I'm playing Forza now. It's that fast. Whoa, okay. Well, it might be that fast. I am not that fast. All right, hold on. I'm gonna actually get back on the track here. You can see Forza is running just fine. And if I want, I can jump over to say Hellblade. Again, you can see how fast it loads. In the background, it is saving my Forza game. And there we go, boom. I'm out into another game. Now the cool part about this is that this is all saved across, like even if you shut down the system or whatever, this is all going to work no matter what. And keep in mind that these games that I'm playing are not optimized at all for the Series X, right? These are just standard Xbox One games that you could play like right out of the gate. So if say I want to jump over to a 360 game, all of the stuff is being saved directly to that SSD. It is really cool. You can imagine what this might look like if say I'm playing on Series X titles that are actually optimized for this use. But I mean, that is so cool to be able to just have essentially no load times going between, you can see this is my 5th game, and again, no problems. Right in, boom.
Go back to State of Decay.
Oh yeah, you'll see, it's all still loaded up here. Like you can see, we're what, 3-4 seconds between these games, depending on which one we're at. Look, State of Decay doesn't even, like, it jumps right on the internet without even, like, missing a beat. But that is a good look at the actual hardware behind the Series X. But the rest of the supporting components I think are really interesting because there's a lot that goes in to putting together the Xbox Series X. Microsoft have actually set up a very cool little demo here where most of these parts are obviously slightly modified, they're magnetized, but essentially I can put together the Series X and show what it looks like from top to bottom.
So to start out with, we have this center chassis.
So this is a piece of aluminum which actually serves a bunch of functions. So not only does it help give some structure, but everything attaches to it. So let's see if I can do this right. I'm gonna start out with the rear I/O board. I know how to do this, I'll definitely get it right, it's fine. Which goes in like this. So you can see there are a ton of air channels here, but essentially it should just go with the I/O facing out. And look at that. Look how good I am at building things. All the guys who designed this are standing right over here. I'm definitely getting a little nervous. No judgment, it's fine. Okay, so the next step would be to take the other part of the main board and it should just attach like this. So you can see essentially we have the SoC and the memory facing this way. And then we have the other main board facing this way with like our SATA port and some of our various connectors with like the South bridge. You can see that the I/O all comes together like this. So this would stick out the back of the console. So with this level of power, there is a lot of, well, literal power flowing through the chip, and all of that has to go somewhere. And that somewhere is a ridiculous vapor chamber. So while the Xbox One X was the first Xbox to feature a vapor chamber, this is a whole other level. So not only do you have the aluminum fins on the back where airflow will pass through, but you can see this is a massive vapor chamber. So actually if I take off the SoC here, you can kind of get a little bit of an idea of what this looks like. So essentially the SoC will go on with this little section right here. So it will cool not only the chip, but also the VRM around it. And then you also have all of your GDDR6 memory, which can also make contact here. But there is certainly a lot of heat that has to be dissipated by this vapor chamber. So let's see if I can actually put it together. So next we have the SoC chassis, which goes on something like this. Oh, there we go. All right. Next, I need to put the vapor chamber on, which obviously will go something like this. There we go. Okay, that's starting to look a little bit more like an Xbox. Now we have the power supply. This is actually a very compact unit. I remember back when the Xbox One came out, the original, and it had that huge external supply. Well, now we've got a 300 watt supply, which not only fits inside, but is also cooled by the exact same fan, spoiler alert, that cools the rest of the system. So I believe this slots on something like this. Yeah. All right, that's looking like a shape of a thing. Next up, we have the little bottom shield. So I slide it on something like this. Yes! Next up is the optical drive. So this is a very similar Blu-ray drive to what you had on the previous generation. And I believe it goes on something like this. Hey, look at that. Now we're getting a little bit more of an Xbox One shape. Or sorry, did I say Xbox One? Xbox Series X. Next up, we have the fan. And you have to consider this is the only fan in the entire Xbox Series X. So it is a very, very custom unit. So it's a 130 millimeter fan. And you can see that not only are the blades really uniquely shaped, but the entire top shroud is pretty much designed for the optimal airflow to kind of keep things moving. Because you have to keep in mind, with only one fan, the airflow has to be very carefully managed. So if you imagine this is the Series X, which it is very close to at this point, air is coming through a few different channels. So of course a lot of air is passing through the heatsink on the back of the vapor chamber and being exhausted out the top. But air also comes through the center chassis to cool the various components like the SSD. We also have to consider that the power supply needs air, which is exhausted underneath this black little plastic piece. There's a lot going on here, and it all really starts and ends with the fan, which if I can line it up like this, essentially how it sits. Obviously, as someone who builds PCs and stuff, you see a lot of fans in exactly the same, or you see, you're like, oh, we added RGB or whatever. But like, this is such a complicated shape, especially when you look at like the fan blades and the way that this shroud, and this is actually kind of interesting. So you're mentioning this earlier, so there's a little sort of like escape path. So say someone accidentally put something over the top, there's still the ability for air to be exhausted through here. Obviously,
that's right.
It's not optimal, but you know, someone accidentally puts a book on top of your Series X, it's not gonna, you know, immediately go and completely get all the air cut off.
Yeah,
there's a lot of cool stuff here.
There is. The surfacing around on the fan shroud, like you said, it's super complex and super driven by the engineering requirements of getting that air up and then spread out as wide as possible as it exhausts.
If you want a better visual of what this looks like, there happens to be a wonderful graphic right behind me. Look, it's a tornado of heat and exhaust.
You didn't think that one through, did you?
Didn't think that one through at all. Everyone in the room is very upset with me. It is not a tornado. It is a very carefully managed. Also, if you look up close, which you probably never will because no one should ever open up your Series X. I mean, I guess technically you could, but you shouldn't. Inside, there are actually a couple of really interesting Easter eggs. So first of all, a lot of the components are individually labeled. So you can see this is number 1, the center chassis. We have the optical disk drive. There are actually a total of 7 of these things. But my favorite is if you look on the very top of this fan, you'll see a tiny little Master Chief. No one's ever gonna see this, but it is very, very cool that these guys have spent so much time sort of optimizing this layout. Now, I know a lot of people were kind of wondering when you saw the announcement of why the Xbox is shaped as it is. But as we put it all together, you can see that there's actually a lot of very clever engineering that went into putting this together. I almost have the Series X complete. The next step is just to put it all in the chassis, which I'm sure I will get first try, no problem. Okay, so I'm going to line it up, angle it just a little bit. Hey, wait, look, I got it. And there we have the Xbox Series X. Don't look at this side, look at this side. It's fine, look at that. Look how beautiful of a job I've done in developing this console with no help at all from anyone in this room. No one just told me how to do that or anything like that. Thanks guys, appreciate it. So you know I'm gonna have to ask the question that the entire internet asked the second that we saw this. Why is it this shape?
Very good question. And it's a good reason. I mean, you put the box together, you can see how all of those big components kind of fit together in this really unique way.
Yeah.
And it's all driven by pulling air through the system with this, with this big axial fan on the top.
Are you concerned at all about this not fitting like under people's TVs or anything like that?
No, I mean, that's a good question. We were really conscious about being able to fit into people's homes, fit in to the TV consoles that they had now on their shelves. One of the cool things about this is as you were doing, you can put it down sideways, you can use it vertically. It's actually got a really small footprint, so you can put it on a much shallower shelf than you ever could before. So we think it gives people a lot of flexibility in where they can put it.
So I know when I first saw this, and of course if you've seen the announcement video, you'll see that you've got the little scoop on the top with what looked like LEDs, but in fact it's sort of more of like an optical illusion here, right?
We have, I mentioned the fan needs to pull a lot of air. We need really big holes, and we decided to embrace that as a design element. And we added this slight dish on a really deep set of holes here so that as you look at it, your view changes and you see more or less inside. And the green was really, kind of a nod to like our fans, a nod to Xbox. It's got like the soul of Xbox inside it, and it reveals itself like as you get closer.
A new console is nothing without a new controller, and the Series X has some interesting differences. So you can see we have everything from the Duke all the way up to the Series X. And while at first glance this looks very, very similar to the Xbox One, there actually are some pretty significant differences. So one of the first ones is actually in the size. So while the grip and everything down here is pretty much the same, the top has been tapered a little bit more, so it's better for smaller hands. And in fact, there's actually a demo here. There's basically a giant controller to kind of give you a sense of what it would feel like. And it's still very comfortable even if you do have those smaller hands. Also, this looks hilarious. So a lot, of course, is very similar. So the sticks and a lot of the buttons feel the same. However, we do now have a much nicer D-pad. So it's nicely faceted, it has a nice sort of clicky action, and we also do have a share button built in. Now on the bottom, it is pretty much identical, so a lot of accessories, including your headsets and everything, should just slide in no problem on the bottom. And if we flip over to the top, we now have USB-C. Now if we open up the back, you will see that we have the exact same setup as the Xbox One. So it will ship with AA batteries, and you can of course still use your play-in charge kit. Obviously, if you really value AA batteries, that's an option, although rechargeables are definitely the way that I like to go. But interestingly, this is a very different style of sort of controller that they've done in the past, mostly because this is actually backwards compatible with the Xbox One and vice versa. So obviously there are some improvements here. At its sort of core fundamentals, this is not wildly different than Xbox One, which means that if you want to take your current Xbox One controller and move it over to the Series X, or even take a Series X controller and play it on Xbox One, you can absolutely do that. Now, it still doesn't take advantage of the Xbox wireless radio, and they've actually done a lot of work to improve the latency so that the controller will sort of update the console more often. But interestingly, on top of that, it does, of course, you can connect it via USB, but it does have Bluetooth Low Energy. So if, say, you're using this with an iPhone or an Android or something, it will be a little bit more energy efficient and it'll be a little bit quicker. One very cool demo on the Series X is the ability to do HDR reconstruction. So you can see right here we have Halo 5, and keep in mind it's going to be very bright since it's now in HDR. But essentially what we've got here is a game which was never originally designed to have HDR implementation. However, using some very clever trickery, you can see on this display, everything in the orange and you see anything in the reds and whites, that's actually full HDR color space, which was not originally designed into the game. To me, I can't believe, like, just looking at this, yeah, you can see like how bright it gets over here for a game that was never designed for it. And the cool thing is this actually works for more than just like an Xbox One game that never had HDR. We got a demo earlier of an original Xbox game, Fusion Frenzy, clearly never designed with HDR in mind, and it still looks great. Maybe not quite as good as Halo, but you know. So I have the exact same level loaded up on both of these Series X dev kits. So you can see on this we have the full HDR reconstruction where especially you get a lot of brightness here, and this is a heat map. So essentially all this is doing is just showing us based on the color where we're really getting that extra brightness and that extra range that of course was never designed. So you can see with the fire, you can see with this over here, and if I try to throw a grenade at the same time, you can see, yeah, that's actually, I'll do that again, that's cool. It's so bright. Like, realistically, if this just was the way I played the game, I don't think I would ever realize that this wasn't something that the developer had intended, right? This is something that can be added, and this can be added with essentially no impact to performance. What is this called? We know obviously it's the Xbox Series X, but you know, we've had the Xbox, we had the 360, we had the One. What is this generation called?
This generation is just called Xbox, and this specific console is the Xbox Series X.
Okay, gotcha. So fourth generation Xboxes are just the Xbox.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely. We want people to be able to just go in and say, I want the latest Xbox. So that's why we named it Xbox.
You've been working on this for how long now?
Xbox Series X development started in 2016, so we've been working on it for 4 years.
One X.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming it's got to be nice to finally show off your baby.
That's why we're so excited to have you here, is to actually be able to start sharing more details about what the team's been working on for the last 4 years.
Look, I've got to give you props. I did not realize, first of all, it's kind of crazy to me that you guys are being this upfront and open about a console, 6 months or whatever before launch. But on top of that, you've shown us so much stuff and we get to show so much in the video. Why are you guys being so open about this ahead of time? Aren't you afraid that people are gonna be like, oh, time to steal some notes or whatever? Or do you, what's the thought behind that?
Honestly, we're just really proud with what we've actually built. You know, we've been working on this for so long, and it's finally great to just start sharing more details. And as we get closer to launch, we're really focused on showing what the platform can actually do and the awesome games you'll be able to play.
You do consider this to be a new generation though, right? It's definitely...
Yeah, like the technology inside of this generation is so transformative, and the kinds of gaming experiences you're going to be able to experience are just so fundamentally different, and it's really unlocked by all the power that we put in the box.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe to the channel because there's going to be a whole lot more on the Series X coming soon.